Welcome to the Edw Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree, and we have this session here every week, every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time for you to join. So you can ask questions about anything data vault, data-driven solutions, cloud computing, MPP, cluster computing, and so on. It's all good. You can use the chat here in the client if you want to raise a live question. You can use the Q&A of this tool and just raise your hand if you want to get voice. And you can also use a form, which I show you the link for at the end of today's session. If you receive multiple questions via the form, I would essentially cherry pick, depending on my mood or my essentially the agenda that I want to follow. And it's time box 10 minutes roughly for a good YouTube video. Today, I want to talk about a question we received. Let me just show it to you. There you go. This is about essentially the attendee here picked up a session that we had in a couple of weeks ago where I talked about the enterprise database environments. And I said, I would like to have at least 4, well, actually the minimum is 3, maybe 4, better 5 environments. And so that's all good. But then let's say we have 4 environments: dev, test, pre-prod, or UAT as I call it, and production. And then you have a large data set in production, petabytes of data, whatever, lots of data. And there's 2 issues here, and I focus only on the first one. Okay, so let's focus today on the first question here. They can't handle the amount of data in the pre-production or UAT environment in testing and development. So they have to subset the data set essentially. And that's today's focus of the question. I picked it up next week again when we talk about the second part, the anonymization of data. So let's focus on this one here. And is there any option of how we can generate these environments from production? And to be honest, I made some research for another project where we had also some similar requirement where we need to subset the data, the incoming data set. However, let me show you some solutions or my linked list actually. So I have these notes, right? So this is my linked list, couple of tools that I found, lots of open source tools, couple of commercial tools. And yeah, it's just for you check them out. Those were the ones I essentially noted down. So where I could create these subsets based on foreign keys typically. So many of these tools work on existing foreign keys. You essentially, you have a starting point from where you start querying the subset of your incoming data set. And then they assume there's foreign keys in your data source. And based on those foreign key relations, they identify what data needs to be grabbed or loaded from or extracted from the source, so you get a consistent subset in your data set, in the target data set. Well, problem is the foreign keys. Well, these tools here are great when you consider, many of these tools consider or require actually having foreign keys in the data set, in the source data set. And many of these tools are designed for, well, all these tools are designed for relational 3NF data sources. Let's say you have some data in a MySQL database or Oracle database or some Salesforce and so on that you want to subset for statistical purposes, research purposes, and so on. And there's one tool, the second one here, Jailer. Jailer is essentially not assuming that. So they have a 2-step process where you essentially, and let's say that's the tool I'm focusing on a bit, on Jailer. The other ones are interesting for certain cases, for certain use cases, so you want to check them out as well. But Jailer is the one I got essentially interested in, essentially. So essentially what you do is you import a source data set, the metadata from the source, the tables, the relationships, if they exist, because, hey, yeah, I mean, when was the last time when you had a nicely modeled source system with foreign keys, right? So it imports the metadata, and then you can fix, you can essentially add foreign keys in your data set, in your source data set. And based on that, you create some configuration files essentially for your dependencies and for your initial query. And in this graphical editor, you essentially create some config files that you can then use in a Java library to extract the subset of data from the data source. That's a basic rough idea essentially. And that's what I like about it, because there's this option for configuring the data source. Now, these tools are for extracting data from they're good for us for extracting data from a data source. But you talked about a data warehouse environment, and I assume it's about data vault, right? And the question becomes, do we need all this? I mean, it's interesting and might be useful for you. And that's why I'm adding this. But the question is, do we need all this? Because in Data Vault, if you want to subset a data vault, how would I start? Because let's assume that your enterprise database is well modeled, so it's valid, right? That's the requirement. You have no what we call the ghost figures, orphans. You have no orphans in your data vault model. It's all consistent essentially, and it's modeled in a data-driven approach. So I would stick with that. Plus, in the best case, you visualize a lot in the business vault and in information mart. But even if not, you follow the business vault design as we teach it essentially. So it's all by the book, by the standard essentially. If that's the case, what you could do is, what about this? What I would do is to subset a data vault model, because that's all I need. I just need the raw data vault plus the business logic. Maybe even I could also subset the business vault. I could even subset maybe the information marts. Depends a bit on your target model, right? But if they're visualized, I don't care. It's just a view on top. My focus is really on subsetting the raw data vault and maybe the materialized business vault entities. That's what I need to subset. Everything else I can reproduce in the other environments, right? So I need to copy that data into your testing environment, for example. So how would I start? I would start with the hubs. Remember, the data vault model is a scale-free network where we have essentially a limited number of dependencies. It starts with hubs, it's in a node, then you have links and you have satellites. Maybe those satellites are attached to the hubs and to the links. So we're looking at three levels in the data model, right? And that's the advantage now. So I would start with the hubs, and you might want to reduce the number of records in the hub. So you typically do a random sample on the hash key. The hash key is a nicely distributed value, right, for every business key. So you just go for a let's say 10% or 50% of your hubs, and you could even decide that hub for hub. So how many records you want to have from your customers, from your products, and so on. You maybe want to reduce your large hubs only, that kind of stuff, right? So go for the hubs and identify the subset, typically a random subset. And then what I would focus on next is the non-historized links and the depend chart links. And here I would most probably use a historical sample, only getting the last 2 years of booking transactions from the bank, for example, or the last 3 months of IoT data, that kind of stuff. So you identify the subset based on the load date timestamp and decide on how much volume of data you want to essentially extract from a production environment. So those are filter conditions on the hash key, on the load date timestamp. Same here, it would be applied for bridge tables if you need to subset them as well. And once you have that, everything else is simple the derivation of references. So because there might be links between the hubs, right? So you identify those links where the hub references include a hash key which is still in your hub definition, in your subset of the hub. For those, you might need to add additional business keys from the hubs, because these links refer to business keys or hash keys that you didn't include into a random sample, but it's easy. So you can quickly identify the hash keys from the hub references in the links, which you don't have in the hub yet. So you add them essentially. And then for the satellites, same game. You essentially just depends a bit on the satellite structure, if you have a lot of deltas or not. In the most simple case, you just load all the deltas from the satellite where you selected the hash key from the hub or from the link. So all those deltas you want to have. You can reduce that. Let's say if a satellite with a lot of deltas, which you want to reduce as well, you would then essentially reduce it to the should work with last deltas based on the load date timestamp. To like a historical, you would do a historical sample essentially again. And then if there's foreign keys there, fine, good for you. If not, we can derive them from the metadata of the raw data vault, right? So we don't care if there's foreign keys or not, because we have the metadata for the generation process. So that's the basic idea. You rely on the fact that the data vault model follows certain patterns, hubs referenced by links, and links and hubs are described by satellites. And that's the model, nothing more, right? That simplifies the process for us. It's not a TRINF model where you have a lot of dependencies back and forth between all these tables, right? We don't have that on purpose to load everything in parallel and so on. That's the basic idea. And we leverage it here. And now think about this. If you combine that knowledge now with a tool like Jailer or some other tool where you maybe would deliver the metadata, these tools extract the metadata of the tables, the columns, the foreign keys from the source system. What if you deliver it, right? Based on the metadata that you have already on the raw data vault. So you know the foreign keys. If you have them or not, doesn't matter. You know the foreign keys between your satellites and the hubs, for example. So if you deliver that metadata into these tools, they can start using that knowledge to extract the data. That's the basic idea I'm looking into, essentially. Yeah, that's the basic idea. And Jailer is interesting because you can, I mean, this is just XML data or these JSON data where they store the model. So you could think about generating these, or I think CSV files, to be honest. But you could generate these configuration files as well, right? So that's the idea. Yeah, might be worthwhile. The problem is it's essentially some work we do in some project. I can't give you any feedback of how these tools work for real on actual data sets at the moment, because I'm not there yet from a testing perspective, but that's my notes essentially. That's what I'm looking into for subsetting. There are some commercial tools as well, available as well, which you could leverage. So just check out these links here for some options essentially. All right, we post these links into the YouTube video as well, into the description. So if you don't want to write them down or something, but you will find them, I think. Cool. All right, good question. If you have a question like this, check out this form here, sfr.ee/dbfriday. Again, that's a form where you can upload your questions, upload some pictures if you want. And also check out our other webinars on Warescape and DBT. Those are monthly webinars at scalefree.to/webinars. And if you can, make it to Hanover on October 10 and 11 is when we have the Data Dreamland conference. Interesting speakers already that we found. So it's super interesting stuff. Lots of customers coming up, showing essentially the audience what we're doing for them. And some vendors are coming. So it's really nice and good gathering. Should be a good gathering. All right, 2 days of fun and good talks. All right, cool. The weekend will be nice, so enjoy it, guys. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.